I'm going to email you a list of the people that this group supports. This is the biggest ad hoc political group and definitely the wealthiest in D.C.
Tony had spent 5 months inside the pro-Israel lobby in the United States. Our undercover reporter wanted to learn more about how funding is secured for congressmen.
Speaking of the devil.
David Oakes, a prominent pro-Israel advocate, invited Tony to a fundraising event. Oakes later called him to discuss the details.
Is it just a social event?
No, hold on. I'm going to email you a list of the people that this group supports. This is the biggest ad hoc political group and definitely the wealthiest in D.C. Hold on. Mark Kirk, the senator from Illinois. Ted Deutsch from Florida. Barbara Comstock, she's the congressman from Virginia. Richard Byrd from North Carolina. Kelly Ayotte, she's fantastic. She's in the Arms Committee. They'll walk in the room and they'll say everything here is off the record. And then they'll say, here's a little bit about me, and then people will ask very specific questions.
The fundraiser was being held in a wealthy suburb of Washington.
A big tech group. It makes a difference. It really, really does. It's the best bang for your buck, and the networking is phenomenal. Congressmen and senators don't do anything unless you pressure them. They kick the can down the road unless you pressure them. And the only way to do that is with money.
Right now, our current contribution limit from any person to a candidate is $2,700. Now, that's a lot of money, you know, and that can certainly buy some gratitude with the lawmaker. But if you really want to add punch to that type of buying of favors, what you do is you get 50 or 100 people together at an event like this, all chipping in $2,700, and then you bundle it all together and hand over the total amount to the lawmaker. At that point, we're talking anywhere up to $250,000. So suddenly you've got a group of people with the same demand they want from the lawmaker handing over $250,000. That buys a lawmaker.
The fundraiser was for Anthony Brown, who ran for Congress in November 2016.
This is direct spending. Brown's going to use that 30 grand to do ad campaigns. So they strategically pick the ones who are in the close reaches that they want to build relationships with. So we want the Jewish community to go face to face in a small environment, 50, 30, 40 people, and say, this is what's important to us. We wanted to make sure if we give you money that you're going to enforce the Iran deal. That way, when they need something from him or her, like the Iran deal, they can quickly mobilize and say, look, we'll give you 30 grand. They actually impact it.
He's actually saying we're buying these office holders. And that's the point. We're chipping in all this money so we can hand over $100,000 or $200,000 to the office holders so we can buy them.
You're not supposed to advertise. There's all these advertising laws. I was surprised they had an invite. I've never seen an actual invite before.
Oakes described a similar event he attended in New York, which included donors from Wall Street.
In New York, with Jeff Talbot, we don't ask a goddamn thing about the Palestinians. You know why? Because it's a tiny issue, that's why. It's a small, insignificant issue. The big issue is Iran. We want everything focused on Iran. What happens is Jeff meets the congressman in the back room, tells them exactly what his goals are. And by the way, Jeff Talpin is worth $250 million. Basically, they hand him an envelope with 20 credit cards and say, you can swipe each of these credit cards for $1,000 each.
There is a disclosure law that is designed to highlight whether there may be potential money laundering going on in events like this. And that is if the funds are earmarked. And that means the organization has to disclose who showed up at that event and how much each individual chipped in and what they handed over to the lawmaker.
What's the name of the group that puts this on?
It doesn't have a name. There's no name. It's an ad hoc political group. For all the legal reasons, people pool their money.
What this specific group is doing to try to avoid that disclosure requirement, it isn't taking money and then putting it in its own account and then handing it over to the office holder. It's just collecting credit card information and then turning that over directly to the candidate. Therefore, it's not violating the earmarking law, and they're not reporting this. And so each individual is subject to that $2,700 limit. And if any individual goes over that limit, they are violating the contribution limit. They cannot legally do that by laundering money through other individuals.
If you give $5,000, Jeff will ensure that I don't go over the $2,600. You know what I'm saying?
A relatively small number of families supply hundreds of millions of dollars annually to lobby politicians. One of the most effective uses of the lobby's funds occurs when Congress is on its break.
Every year, they fly hundreds of members of Congress to Israel for these extended travel junkets that are really lavish. They're first-rate vacations. They'll rack up $20,000 or more for a vacation for a member of Congress. The member can bring along their spouse, and they have a great time.
An attempt was made to change the law so that all expenses-paid trips would be considered a bribe.
I drafted legislation to try to reform the whole profession of lobbying to get rid of free travel and gifts from lobbyists. The Honest Leadership and Open Government Act of 2007 significantly enhanced the travel restrictions that if you're an organization that employs a lobbyist, you can only provide a one-day trip for a member of Congress.
Then AIPAC exerted its influence.
There was a major loophole written into the travel restriction that was essentially engineered by AIPAC, and this loophole is widely known as the AIPAC loophole.
The clause excluded educational trips organized by a charity that didn't hire lobbyists. AIPAC happened to be affiliated to such a charity.
It doesn't have an office, it doesn't have any employees, it's just a tax form that they filed. Gifts of dinner, gifts of wonderful resorts to stay at, gifts of entertainment, all of which is packed up into one of these trips, is a very, very effective tool at influence peddling.
The money raised by AIPAC doesn't just fund congressmen who support their goals.
If you wander off the reservation and you become critical of Israel, you not only will not get money, AIPAC will go to great lengths to find somebody to run against you and support that person very generously. And the end result is you're likely to lose your seat in Congress.
They threaten. They immediately threaten. Even if they know that AIPAC can't defeat them, AIPAC can make their lives more difficult. They can make sure that their next town meeting or something, some members of the Jewish congregation jump up and say, "But you're anti-Israel."
In 2002, AIPAC was lobbying Moran to vote for the invasion of Iraq.
The executive director of AIPAC said that his most important accomplishment was securing the authorization for the use of U.S. military force in Iraq. AIPAC was pushing it very hard.
Why does AIPAC benefit from the United States going to war?
The United States getting involved in wars in the Middle East is ultimately in Israel's interests, because we have a stake in the region.
Congressman Moran refused to vote for the invasion, as AIPAC requested.
There are compelling, fundamental reasons why this body should oppose this resolution.
Then at a public meeting, he was asked a question.
A Jewish woman actually stood up in a town hall and she said, why aren't more Jews involved in the marches against the war? I said, if the leaders of the Jewish community were opposed to the war, I think that would make a difference.
The lobby reacted, claiming this was evidence of Moran's belief in a Jewish conspiracy that was leading America to war.
There was a conservative rabbi in my district who was assigned to me, I assume, by AIPAC. And he had warned me that if I voiced my views about the Israeli lobby, that my career would be over, and implied that it would be done through the Post. And sure enough, the Washington Post editorialized brutally. Everybody ganged up.
So what are the main outlets that TIP work with?
Washington Post is the biggest one.
Okay. Isn't that like just down there or something?
Yeah, it's actually that building.
Moran claims the Washington Post's editorial board has a close relationship with AIPAC.
The principal editorial board of the Post itself has been a very effective instrument because they've been able to maintain their credibility. And it's a great paper in every other way, but because they have such credibility, they're extremely effective.
Everyone knew he wasn't anti-Semitic. Anti-Semitism has come to mean anti-Israel.